Welcome to our sanctuary. Find a comfortable position. Take a deep breath and let it go slowly. Feel the weight of the day begin to dissolve. Tonight, we drift not to the desert sands, but to the cool, echoing halls of ancient Thebes, the monumental capital of Egypt during its greatest age. Imagine the vast, dark sky of the 18th dynasty, around the year 1500 BC. Below the perfect diamond stars, the great pylons of the Karnak temple stand silent, holding secrets carved into their eternal stone. We are listening for the whisper of a name, Hatshepsut. She was a woman born into a lineage of warrior kings, a princess who found herself facing the ultimate contradiction of her culture. Egypt was ruled by pharaonic tradition, an office meant to be held by a man, a living god on earth. But the needs of the empire were often greater than tradition, so the question we carry into the deep silence of this ancient world is this: what does it take for a woman bound by the strict laws of a divine patriarchy to seize the ultimate throne, change her identity, and rule with the strength of a king? Let the stillness of this night guide your mind as we begin to uncover the sheer, impossible ambition of the pharaoh Hatshepsut. To truly appreciate the improbable ascent of Hatshepsut, we must first ground ourselves in the soil, the spirit, and the colossal scale of the Egyptian world she inherited. She was not born in a time of weakness or decline, but at the glittering, confident dawn of the new kingdom, specifically the 18th dynasty. Imagine the psychological effect of this era. Just a few generations before Hatshepsut's birth, her ancestors, the great warrior kings, Ahmose I and Thutmose I, had successfully expelled the Hyksos invaders who had occupied Egypt for a century. This victory was not just military, it was a profound spiritual and cultural rebirth. The people of Thebes, her home, felt they had been chosen by the gods, particularly the great sun god Amen, to restore the harmony of the universe, the principle known as Mat. Now, place yourself inside the royal palace in Thebes. On the west bank of the Nile, the air is thick with the scent of lotus blossoms and costly incense imported from the distant land of Punt. The sounds are the low chant of priests, the distant rhythmic clatter of construction, a constant reminder of the pharaoh's power, and the rustle of fine linen clothing. Hatshepsut, born around 1508 BCE, was the daughter of Thutmose I, a brilliant military leader who had expanded Egypt's borders further than ever before, cementing a vast empire that stretched from Nubia in the south to the Euphrates River in the north. Her mother, Ahmose, was the great royal wife, a woman of impeccable lineage who connected Hatshepsut directly back to the founders of this powerful dynasty. This lineage is crucial. In Egyptian culture, while the office of pharaoh was male, the royal bloodline, the connection to the divine source of power, often passed through the most prominent royal women. Queens like Ahotep and Amosnefertari, the grandmothers of the dynasty, were revered as deities. They were military leaders and regents who, through their purity of blood, legitimized their husbands and sons. Hatshepsut watched and learned. She saw that while men held the visible power, women were the hidden anchors of dynastic stability. Her childhood, therefore, was not one of simple domesticity. It was a rigorous education in the divine kingship. She was trained in administration, the complex rituals of the temple cults, and the symbolic language necessary to rule. She would have been keenly aware of the political fragility that often followed the death of a great pharaoh. When Thutmose I died, the line of succession was precarious. Hatshepsut was his only child of pure royal blood, a fact that was both a great blessing and a terrible complication for a throne that demanded a man. Her destined role was to marry her half-brother, Thutmose, to a son born to her father by a lesser queen, and, through her superior lineage, elevate and legitimize his claim. This was her traditional duty, to be the magnificent vessel of divine power, not the wielder of it. Yet, the palace corridors were already whispering of her exceptional intelligence and force of will. Hatshepsut dutifully stepped into her expected role as great royal wife to Thutmose II. She fulfilled the sacred duty, but history shows she was no silent consort. The reign of Thutmose II was relatively short, lasting only about 13 to 15 years, and appears to have been plagued by illness and minor military rebellions. We can only imagine the political calculations and constant maneuvering Hatshepsut conducted behind the scenes. While Thutmose II was pharaoh, Hatshepsut's presence in official reliefs and inscriptions began to grow in prominence unusually so for a queen. This early visual assertiveness suggests she was already laying a foundation for influence, perhaps due to the king's failing health. The inevitable crisis arrived. Thutmose II died, leaving behind a young son, Thutmose III, born to a concubine named Isit. This was the moment the serpent's knot tightened, a child king with an impure lineage, and the great royal wife Hatshepsut, who held the legitimate bloodline, the administrative acumen, and the political will. The tradition was clear. Hatshepsut would become regent. For the first time, she formally held the reins of power, ruling on behalf of the boy king, her nephew and stepson. The title of regent, God's wife of Amun, was already deeply powerful. The high priestess of Amun was second only to the pharaoh in religious authority. This was her first and most critical move. For the first few years, everything seemed normal. She ruled, she trained Thutmose III, and she maintained the state. But the power vacuum was too tempting, and the political stakes were too high. She would have observed that any regent could be dismissed, any boy king could be deposed or sidelined. To secure stability, both for the empire and for her own vision, she needed something more permanent, more divine. The historical record begins to show an unprecedented shift around 7 years into Thutmose III's official reign. Hatshepsut's titles began to change. She wasn't just the regent. She was the king's principal daughter and the lady of the two lands. Then, in a moment that shattered 3,000 years of tradition, she took the final, decisive step. Hatshepsut unilaterally declared herself pharaoh. This was not a simple political coup. It was an act of profound theological transformation. The office of pharaoh was considered the physical embodiment of the sun god Ra and the falcon god Harosa, male god. To rule, she had to essentially rewrite the divine constitution of Egypt. She couldn't simply be a female king. She had to become a male pharaoh. The audacity of this move cannot be overstated. It risked upsetting the cosmic balance that sustained the empire. Hatshepsut understood that she couldn't rely on brute force. She had to rely on divine propaganda to justify her rule to the priests, the nobility, and the common people. Her rule rested entirely on the strength of her story. Hatshepsut knew that tradition dictated a male pharaoh, the physical son of a male god. Her solution was a masterstroke of theological engineering and propaganda. She did not deny tradition. She claimed to be the exception to it. She created the story of her divine birth, a narrative so compelling and beautiful that it was carved onto the walls of her greatest monument, the mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari. Imagine you are standing in that cool, shadowed temple court. The walls tell the story as if it were witnessed fact. The narrative begins with the great god Amen, king of the gods, taking the form of her father. Thutmose I Amen visits her mother, Queen Amos, announcing the divine conception. The scene depicts Amen placing the Ankh, the symbol of life, to the queen's face, filling her with the breath of the divine. The inscriptions quote Amen saying, "The daughter of my own body, Hatshepsut, shall be the name of this child." This wasn't merely a claim of divine favor. It was a retroactive declaration that her father, Thutmose I, had been informed by the god himself that his true, divine heir would be his daughter. This made her birth a sacred, predestined event. This propaganda was absolutely crucial for gaining the support of the powerful priesthood of Amun. By making Amen the direct father of Hatshepsut, she bypassed the need for a male human predecessor. The priests, who held enormous economic and religious influence, now had a compelling theological basis to support her unprecedented claim. Furthermore, she commissioned inscriptions detailing a coronation prophecy spoken by Amun during her childhood, claiming the god had decreed her rule long before the crisis of succession arose. This act shifted her from being a usurper, acting out of political necessity, to a divine mandate, acting out of sacred duty. The physical manifestation of this deception of stone was equally audacious. Hatshepsut began to portray herself visually as a male pharaoh. In her statutes and temple reliefs, she quickly transitioned from the feminine form of a queen to the masculine iconography of a king. She adopted the full pharaonic regalia, the kilt, the false beard, and the nena's headdress adorned with the cobra and the vulture. The most striking element was the false beard, traditionally worn by all pharaohs as a symbol of their immortal masculinity and divinity, connecting them to the god Osiris. However, the inscriptions never lied about her sex. While her statues depicted her with a male physique, the accompanying hieroglyphs consistently referred to her using feminine grammatical pronouns, a unique and fascinating contradiction. For example, she would be called the Lord of the Two Lands, she has made a monument. This served a dual purpose. It maintained the theological fiction necessary for rule while respecting the underlying reality of her sex. She was communicating to the populace, "I am a woman, but I fulfill the role of a man, because the gods commanded it." This period, where she ruled concurrently with the young Thutmose III, saw her consolidate the dual nature of her power, divine and physical, cementing her rule over a conservative, tradition-bound empire. Her very existence was a paradox carved in stone. Unlike the warrior kings who preceded her, and the one who followed, Hatshepsut's long reign, which lasted approximately 22 years, was defined not by military conquest, but by economic prosperity, diplomacy, and massive building programs. This strategic choice was brilliant. War is expensive and divisive. Great building projects create jobs, stimulate the economy, and most importantly for her mandate, leave behind eternal, undeniable evidence of the pharaoh's glory and stability. If her rule was sanctioned by the gods, then the empire must be demonstrably flourishing under her hand. Her greatest achievement in this regard was the restoration of Mat, the balance of order. She boasted not of slaying enemies, but of restoring temples that had fallen into disrepair, of clearing out the chaos left by the Hyksos, and of ensuring that the Nile flooded properly to sustain the crops. This focus on domestic prosperity was exactly what the Egyptian people desired after generations of conflict. Her monuments were, in effect, a peaceful argument for the legitimacy of her rule. The most magnificent of these projects, her architectural masterpiece, is her mortuary temple complex at Deir el-Bahari, known as Djiza Djeseru, Holy of Holies. Imagine this temple carved directly into the sheer cliffs on the west bank of the Nile, rising in 3 massive colonnaded terraces connected by graceful ramps. It is an extraordinary departure from the monolithic pyramids of the Old Kingdom. It feels lighter, more integrated with the natural landscape. The atmosphere here would have been one of awe and reverence, filled with the murmur of priests and the visual spectacle of bright paint on the relief-carved stone. The architecture was not merely beautiful. It was a narrative canvas. The temple walls are the primary source for understanding her reign, detailing the divine birth and her peaceful achievements. But one section stands out, capturing the heart of her economic policy, the depiction of the expedition to the land of Punt. This event, undertaken around the 9th year of her reign, was arguably the most significant diplomatic and trade mission of the new kingdom. Punt was a legendary land, likely located in the region of modern Eritrea or Somalia, known for exotic goods. The reliefs show the ships sailing across the Red Sea and the vibrant, highly detailed scenes of the Punites, their circular dwellings, their flora and fauna. Most importantly, the reliefs proudly display the returning treasures, frankincense and myrrh, essential for temple rituals, rare woods, ebony, ivory, gold, and live incense trees, which she successfully transplanted back to Egypt. This feat not only enriched Egypt but provided the aromatic materials necessary for the daily rituals of the priests, further cementing the loyalty of the powerful Amen clergy. The Punt expedition was Hatshepsut's equivalent of a military campaign. It was a triumphant display of wealth and global influence, all achieved through peaceful trade, securing her reputation as a pharaoh who brought abundance. The greatest tension of Hatshepsut's reign was the simple fact of Thutmose III. He was the legitimate, though young, male heir who was meant to inherit the throne. For over 20 years, Hatshepsut ruled with him, effectively keeping him in her shadow. While he was never physically harmed and received the full education of a prince, he was consistently relegated to junior status. In reliefs, he is often shown behind her, smaller, or performing subordinate tasks. This concurrent rule was a dangerous political tightrope walk. Hatshepsut had to constantly balance her own supreme authority with the need to keep the male heir and his supporters loyal, or at least quiescent. The Egyptian system was designed to prevent 2 equal rulers. It preferred a clear, single divine voice. The long duration of Hatshepsut's rule, however, was fundamentally an usurpation of Thutmose III's seniority. While she claimed the gods had mandated her rule, Thutmose III's claim was simpler. He was the rightful male successor. The key figures in Hatshepsut's administration were equally crucial to her success. She surrounded herself with intensely loyal and competent officials. The most famous and influential among them was Senusret, a man of humble birth who rose to become one of the most powerful non-royal figures in Egyptian history. He was the chief steward of Amen, the overseer of works, and the tutor to Hatshepsut's only daughter, Nefer. Senenmut's close relationship with Hatshepsut is a subject of endless fascination and speculation. His profound wealth and influence are unprecedented for a commoner. He was granted permission to carve his image in hidden places inside Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahari, where only royal figures belonged. His influence on her architectural style and his administrative genius are undeniable. Some historians believe their relationship was merely professional. Others cite the presence of his tomb close to her temple and his access to her daughter as evidence of a deeper, perhaps intimate, bond. Regardless of their personal relationship, Senenmut's organizational skills were vital. He was the executive arm that translated her visionary ambition into the colossal reality of her monuments and the logistical success of the Punt expedition. His sudden, mysterious disappearance from the historical record before the end of her reign is one of the smaller, yet enduring, riddles of this era. The greatest challenge Hatshepsut faced was not a foreign invader, but the passage of time. As the years passed, Thutmose III grew from a boy to a highly skilled and capable warrior. He was relegated to leading minor military campaigns, a job that kept him busy and loyal, but also provided him with invaluable practical experience and built up his own base of support within the army. Hatshepsut knew that one day she would have to face the inevitability of his ascendancy. She had successfully maintained Mat for 2 decades, but the underlying tension of the dual rule remained, a ticking clock hidden beneath the glittering facade of her monuments. Her reign was a triumph of will over tradition, but the final judgment would come not from the gods she claimed, but from the man she had eclipsed. The end of Hatshepsut's story is shrouded in quiet tragedy and historical revisionism. Sometime around 1458 BCE, she died. The circumstances are unclear, though recent forensic analysis suggests she may have suffered from bone cancer, exacerbated by a carcinogenic skin lotion she used. Her death was the signal for the political balance to immediately and dramatically shift. Thutmose III, now a mature and highly competent pharaoh, took full, undisputed control of the empire. For the first 20 years of his solo reign, Thutmose III honored Hatshepsut's memory. Her monuments stood, her temples functioned, and her name remained on the king lists. But then, about 20 years after her death, something changed. Thutmose III initiated a systematic, deliberate campaign of damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory against Hatshepsut. Her name, image, and titles were chiseled off her monuments, particularly at Deir el-Bahari, and her statues were smashed and buried. The images of Senenmut and her daughter Nefer were also largely erased. This was not an act of blind hatred, but a cold, political calculation. Thutmose III was concerned about the precedent Hatshepsut had set. He needed to ensure that no future strong woman could point to Hatshepsut's example and claim the throne for herself. By erasing her, he was not only reclaiming his own rightful place as the sole legitimate inheritor of Thutmose I, but also protecting the patriarchal continuity of the pharaonic office itself. The message was clear. There was one pharaoh, and that pharaoh was male, and his divine authority flowed only through a male line. However, the erasure was never complete. It was sporadic and selective. Only her cartouches, the oval containing her name, were removed from public view. In many inaccessible places, her images and titles were simply left untouched. This suggests the action was more about political theology than personal vengeance. The effort was to eliminate her as a role model and political precedent, not necessarily to destroy every trace of her. Ultimately, the very act of trying to erase her preserved her story. Her massive, enduring monuments shielded her memory. When archaeologists rediscovered her temple in the 19th century, the evidence of the chisel marks and the buried statues provided the exact roadmap needed to piece her improbable life back together. Hatshepsut's tomb in the Valley of the Kings was small and simple, but her real tomb was her temple Djeseru. She was the greatest female ruler of Egypt, a pharaoh who traded war for trade, who used theology to conquer tradition, and whose 20-year legacy of peace and prosperity was so powerful that it took her successor decades to find the courage to erase her name. Even then, he failed. Her whispers of power endure in the very stones he tried to silence. Hatshepsut's story serves as a profound echo of the human element in history. It is a testament to sheer, calculating ambition, woman who leveraged her birthright and her intelligence to seize an office that was closed to her gender. Her psychological journey from the dutiful vessel of bloodline to the figure in the false beard is the ultimate narrative of personal transformation driven by the absolute necessity of power. Her legacy is not merely one of monuments. It is a question mark placed against the limits of gender and tradition in the ancient world. Her quiet vengeance, of course, came from the resilience of her stone. The very buildings Thutmose III sought to deface became the libraries that held her truth. They stand now, under the unchanging gaze of the desert sun, a permanent record of a golden age achieved through peace. As the great river Nile flows on, indifferent to the petty battles of mortal men and women, so too should your mind find its own steady current. We leave the colossal monuments and the whispering secrets of Hatshepsut behind. We have followed her story from the palace to the temple, through the struggle for legitimacy, and into the quiet moment of historical silence. We come now to the final quiet reflection on Hatshepsut's extraordinary life. Her story, preserved in the very stones meant to silence her, leaves us with a profound paradox that can calm the busy mind. She achieved the seemingly impossible, ruling as a woman in a role fundamentally defined by masculinity. But to do so, she had to erase her public, feminine self and embrace an ancient, divine lither, false beard, and the title of Pharaoh. She won the throne, but she lost her identity to it. Yet, in that loss, she found a different kind of strength. Her monuments, her successful trade missions to Punt, and the 20 years of peace and prosperity she fostered were the fruits of her deep strategic mind, proving that stability and greatness were achievable through intelligence and diplomacy, not just through the sword. In the calm of her mortuary temple, Djeseru, she created a permanent testament to her philosophy, that the order of Mat could be restored and maintained by a ruler of exceptional competence, regardless of their gender. As you lie still, allow this paradox to soothe your own internal conflicts. Hatshepsut's struggle reminds us that the greatest battles are often fought not with enemies, but with the expectations of the world and the expectations we place upon ourselves. Her triumph was not in her destruction of rivals, but in her monumental creation of something new. A period of Egyptian history so vibrant and wealthy that even the great Thutmose III, the brilliant military pharaoh who followed her, had to build his empire upon the stability she had established. Let your thoughts drift away from the details of the past and settle instead on the enduring images. The slow, magnificent flow of the Nile, the scent of frankincense wafting from the temple of Ammon, and the profound, geometric silence of the great cliffs of Deir el-Bahr. These are the elements that endure long after human ambition has faded. We leave her now, not as the warrior king, but as the woman who defied time itself. Her cartouches may have been hammered off the walls, but the truth was too vast to erase. It was simply carved in places too high to reach, whispering the secret of her power to the quiet desert air. She accomplished her mission, she transformed her world, and now, her story has guided us to this moment of stillness. Now, there is only the quiet certainty of the earth beneath you. Let the last vestiges of the day fall away. You have traveled across for millennia, witnessed the ultimate political intrigue, and now, it is time to rest. Allow the sounds to take over. You are no longer listening for a story, but for the rhythm of the ancient world. Hear the faint rhythmic murmur of the Nile against its banks. Imagine the immense, still blackness of the Egyptian night sky, where the million stars shine in perfect silence. There are no lamps, no traffic, only the hush of the desert wind moving slowly over the great, sleeping river and the colossal silent forms of the monuments. Feel the profound peace of a world where time is measured not in hours, but in epoch. The ambition, the intrigue, the great monuments all now yield to the deep, healing silence of the night. There is nothing left to hold on to, only the breathing deep, slow, and even. Let the earth hold you. Let the ancient silence mend the fractured thoughts of the day. We leave you now in the deepest, most tranquil space. The whispers of power have faded. Only the sound remains. Drift deeply.